we've been reading here, where it says, press on. But I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Now, when you hear the word press on, there's a little bit of assumption. When you're starting a race, there's no reason to press on. You're not tired yet. So press on only kicks in after you've experienced some fatigue. So after you've made it so far into a race, your body's going to start to break down. In our Christian journey, emotionally, mentally, there's going to be some breakdowns. And that is where you need to press on, as Paul is telling us. And so I want to walk you through some of Paul's persecution and hardships here. And so he says, I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, and been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews -1. Now we all know Jesus, he was whipped and beaten. Jesus was whipped 39 times. Paul is saying here that he had from the Jews. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. In a boat, right? I mean, if every time you get in a boat, you're getting shipwrecked for the cause of Christ, at some point you'd be like, you know what? Another way, you'd stop getting in a boat. Stuff like that would stick with you. I remember we took a family trip to Yosemite National Park years ago, and our youngest son, Nate, he was probably about 4 years old at the time. And this is where Julie and I are very different when it comes to parenting. I thought it was a great idea to take the kids across the river. Julie wanted nothing to do with it. She stayed in the room. And so I started taking the kids across the river, and it was a pretty good rushing river. But there was enough rocks that I thought, we can calculate and get across. So sure enough, I get the kids across safely. It took us a while, but we made it. So not only did we make it, but now I think, you know what, this moment needs to be captured. So I decide to leave, this is my error in judgment, I decide to leave my kids on this safe little rock, and I go halfway across the river so I can get a nice picture of them on the other side of the river. What I didn't happen to notice is that our youngest son had taken a step or two forward and landed on some moss. And so while I'm going the river, he slides into the river and starts getting carried downstream. So I do all I can. I get down. He goes down a little 4 to 5 foot waterfall. I jump in. He's getting tumbled around, head over heels in like this. You guys remember this from the debrief for our whitewater rafting. They told you what happens once you go down the waterfall. If you fall out, you'll just tumble around there. And so he's caught in this current. I'm able to pull him out. We get him back up to the room. He is just freezing. But for years, anytime he even heard the sound of rushing water, even in a bathtub, it would kind of freak him out a little bit. And so I kind of think that with Paul, like getting shipwrecked, that's something that's going to stick with you. You're not going to be so excited to go on another adventure for Christ that involves anything with a boat, but yet he did it 3 times. Not only that, there was an instance where he had to spend a day and night in the open sea. He goes on to say in verse 26, I have been constantly on the move. I have been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false believers. I have labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. I mean, you go through this list and it's hard to believe. I mean, what kind of a person would keep following Christ unless you knew for certain that God had called you to something great. And you were going to, no matter what, you were going to make sure that you hit that goal. And so Paul, what he's actually doing, he's going from city to city. He's planting churches. And that was a new concept. There was no like church planting formula developed yet that you could, go and learn from. You couldn't go partner with a parent church for years, like they do now. This is a brand new thing. Paul's going around from city to city all around Southeast Asia, planting churches. And as he's doing this, he's getting persecuted. His life is on the run. He's getting put in chains everywhere he goes. Not only that, but he also has other people who claim to be believers who are accusing him of different things. I'm going to run through this list again one more time because there's some things on this list that appear in other portions of Scripture that are not in the one we just read. So as far as persecution, he was stoned and left for dead. He was attacked by an angry mob, beaten with rods 3 times, whipped with 39 lashes 5 times. He had multiple death threats. Some of these other hardships, he was shipwrecked like we talked about 3 times. He was criticized by other Christians. He was under arrest for 2 years without a trial, and he was bitten by a viper. And so going back to our running analogy, you could easily say that Paul is definitely doing the Iron Man right here for Christianity, right? He is the Iron Man when it comes to our faith. If you had to put a list of the people who've had the toughest race for Christ, Paul is probably going to be pretty close to the top of that list. And so I kind of want to take that next step here in our discussion and see what it is that makes somebody kind of continue on in their journey and how we can relate to that. What can we do rather than getting in the habit of just always starting things and just feel like we're in the starting phase of our walk for Christ? What can we do to get to that next level and push through and endure? And so I want to do something a little bit fun today. And you guys didn't know it, but when you came in today, you actually picked a team. So we do this in student ministry all the time, so our guys are used to this. But if you came in and sat on this side, you are on this team over here, and then we have another team over here. So this is how we do it. There's a line right down the middle. And so I need a volunteer from Team A, and I need a volunteer from Team B. And before you get too excited, as you see what's happening behind me, I'm looking for some volunteers who probably did not do arms yesterday, who might have a little bit of upper body strength today. So do we have any guys in here or girls who are feeling extra beefy, extra strong today who can crank out some pull-ups for us? Anyone on this side of the room? We've got a bunch of takers, don't we? I'll come back to you guys. Think about it. All right, on this side of the room, do we have anybody in here who would like to be a volunteer today? Wow, the 8:30 service was a lot braver. We got Andrew back here. All right, give it up for him. And now we just need, you can't have a one-man competition, so who would like to take Andrew? All right, okay, we're gonna be here a while. Come on up, sir. Looks like you're gonna do a lot of pull-ups for us. All right. All right, so I'll have you guys come down here. I know. All right, appreciate it. How you doing? Good. All right, so I want you gentlemen just simply share your name and then share that the most amount of pull-ups that you think you've ever done in your life.
Andrew, 2.
2.
Russ, at once probably about 40.
40. All right, we could be here a while. Okay, so we got Andrew and we got Russ. All right. So we're going to have Andrew go first. So while Andrew gets ready to do pull-ups, and now the only thing I got to show you, when I went into the military, there's one thing they taught us about the pull-ups. They don't count if your arms are only halfway down. So when you do your pull-up on your way down, your arms have to go all the way down. If you stop right here, and you can bend your knees if you need to, then it's not going to count. But before I have you do that, can you give me 25 push-ups real quick? So yeah, just a quick 25. There we go. Yeah, so in the military, we did a lot of running, did a lot of push-ups, and we did a lot of push-ups as well. And so the first point I want to talk about here, when you need to endure, wow, he's going faster than I thought. All right, give him a hand. All right, so we're going to have you jump up there and do some pull-ups real quick. 2, 3, 4. All right, 5. He's got a little kip in there, but that's good. 7, 8, 9. I'm impressed. 10, yeah. 11. Wow. Good job. That was good. Now, coming up here, you thought that you could only do 2.
Sure.
But you did what, 12 there, I think? It was 12. So now some of those wouldn't have been counted by military instructors, but I'm going to give him credit for him because he was like 90% of the way there. So he did a great job. Now, looking back, you thought you could only do 2, but you cranked out 12. How many do you think you could have done if I didn't have you do any push-ups at all?
15.
He's probably right. You probably could have done 15. So what that shows us is that once fatigue sets in, sometimes your walk gets a little bit harder. It's very easy to walk for Christ, when it's new and it's fresh. But when you've been beaten down like Paul has, when you've gone through some of this stuff, it gets a little bit harder. I'm going to have you hang out for a sec, and you get to go next. So, all right. So I've got a backpack here, but it's not an empty backpack. It has a 25-pound weight in it. So I'm going to have you strap this on your back here. All right. And let's get you up there on the bar. Now, he said at one point he's done 40, so this might take some time. I'm trying to slow him down with this 25-pound weight. Go ahead. You want to count him out, Andrew? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. He's getting to 20. 18, 19. Come on, one more. Oh, and I'm counting it. 20. Oh, that was impressive. All right, thank you guys. Before you go, though, I have a little something for you. We always send our volunteers off with something. So a little deodorant, so you're not. They did a great job. I'm very impressed with you guys. And I want to use that to kind of illustrate and give you guys a mental image. We're talking about racing, but it didn't really make sense to have these guys go run a marathon today. But one thing I love about pull-ups is there hits a point where you can be cranking through your pull-ups, and then all of a sudden, all the fatigue sets in, and you just can't do another one. And that's why they use pull-ups as one of the main strength tests when it comes to things like military training and firefighter training, is because all of a sudden you just can't do another one. And so we saw the first one when Andrew got there. He was fatigued. He had already worked his body and had already been pushed to the limit doing some of those push-ups. And so now you get him up there and he starts struggling, but he actually did really good. But like you said, he probably could have done 3 or 4 more if he wasn't fatigued. And secondly, you see what happens in life when you're walking around with some extra weight. I think he probably could have done 35 to 40 pull-ups today if I didn't have a 25-pound backpack on his back. And so many times in our life, in our Christian walk, we feel like we're hitting roadblocks. We feel like we're not really living up to the calling that God has for us. And so my first question to you is, what are you carrying around that you don't need to be carrying around? Are you trying to do pull-ups with a backpack on? Is there something that you need to take off and let go? And I love the verse that Paul's talking about where he says he forgets what is behind. In verse 13, he forgets what is behind him. I don't think there's any way that Paul can carry on and do what he is doing if he's focused on his past, if he's focused on the shipwrecks, if he's focused on the persecution. But his eyes are so fixed on the goal and so fixed on the prize, he doesn't lose sight of it. And so times in life you get fatigued and sometimes you feel burdened. And we definitely have some control over that burden. So like I said, if there's something that you feel like you're carrying around, you got this extra weight on you and that's holding you back from achieving what God has for you, I encourage you to take that weight off and run the race without that burden on you. And Paul, he's talking about remaining and keeping focus. And so our third point here, in order to endure the race, is you can't lose focus. People quit when they lose focus. When you focus on the pain, you lose sight of the goal. In 1 Corinthians 9:24, it says, "Run to win. Our prize is an imperishable crown." You have to keep that prize in front of you. So what are you running for? Do you even know what that is? Do you know what God has called you to? Sometimes it's hard for ourselves to get that picture of what God could actually do through you as an individual. But I know so many people in life who they are living such an abundant life, and it goes back to one person invited them to church. One person. Throughout their entire life, they only had one person who invited them to church, and they took them up on it. They got to experience God, and then their life has changed. And so how many people do we have in our lives who are waiting for that invitation from you? Maybe that's part of your calling. Maybe that's what God has for you. Maybe the reason you're in the job that you're in is because God is using you in that position to reach somebody for him. And so I really want you guys to think about these things. And I want to encourage you, is part of your race reaching out to these people. I want to share a story, something that I've done the last several years, and it's not a marathon, but it's something that takes a lot of training, similar to a marathon. And what helps you get through this is keeping your eyes fixed on the goal. And so I want to bring up a slide here. Many of you guys will recognize this as the Grand Canyon. Now, the Grand Canyon gets 4.5 million visitors every year. And out of the 4.5 million visitors who come to the Grand Canyon, only 40,000 of those visitors will ever get down to the bottom, take the 12-mile hike down, camp a couple nights, and then the 12-mile hike up. And so that's less than 1% of the people who see the Grand Canyon with their own eyes will ever go on that journey. And here's a group I took 1 or 2 years ago here, and we had about 60 or 70 in this group. And when we start training with these students, this trip happened in May. The first week of January, we start getting everybody ready. We start out with some things that are called pre-hikes. And we take the students out to a place, and we start out, hiking 3 to 4 miles, getting your feet used to being in boots, getting used to when you want to quit, to keep going and keep moving forward. And then we up it, and we get to where we can do, 12 to 14 miles at a time with you're putting, real weights and real clothes and food in your backpack, so you're simulating everything you're going to experience on the hike. We'll even hike at the height of the heat, so it's 95-degree heat, because when you're down in the Grand Canyon, you're going to be exposed to some intense, temperatures. And so all this, it's about a 4 to 5 month training program that we put people through before I'm willing to take them into the Grand Canyon. And one thing I have to keep doing is sending out emails and pictures and putting it in front of them why they're doing what they're doing. Because there's nothing too exciting about walking around a desert for 12 miles in Southern California, where you're just going up and down these little dusty roads with a couple cactus. It's not that there's no reward. The reward is what you're preparing for. And so many of you have probably seen this image here. It's called Havasu Falls. If you were to pick up any hiking or outdoor magazine, it's usually 1, 2, or 3 every single year for the best hike or the top destination hike in the United States. And this is the 12-mile hike down to Havasu Falls. It's very difficult to even get a permit for it. And then you're making a big commitment to get there. And so the people who go and peer over the Grand Canyon, you don't even see this. It is miles and miles downstream. You would never even know that this exists. And what makes this 100-foot waterfall so spectacular is the sandstone that's in the rock. It actually comes through and turns the water into this emerald green pool. So it's really kind of, otherworldly. And so you need to keep stuff like this in mind as far as your destination. And so I've got this picture here. My daughter had seen me go to the Grand Canyon and take many other students there year after year. And last year she was finally old enough, so she got to go. And she is one tough little girl. Some of the workouts that she does in her gymnastics, they blow me away. And I saw her raising her hand. She wanted to do the pull-ups. She can do a bunch of pull-ups. But this hike to the Grand Canyon kicked her butt. She was complaining, and she wanted to quit at times. You're carrying extra weight. I think I might have taken your backpack for a mile or two, but for the most part, she got in and out of the Grand Canyon. And so that was kind of a really rewarding time for me and for her. But you got to be focused on what you're going for. And so try to relate all this back to your life when you think about your walk with Christ. And so I love this saying right here. It says, to live a life without strain. It's easy. If you want to live a life without strain, simply live a life without goals. You can live a mediocre life. You can totally just kind of skate through. Chances are nobody's going to remember you when you're gone. Chances are there's not going to be any foundations named in your honor. Chances are when you get to heaven, there's not going to be a bunch of people there running up to you saying, thank you, I'm in heaven because of you. If you want to live a life without strain, simply live a life without goals. But I believe we're called to something bigger than that. Now, I'm not wishing a shipwreck on anybody in this room. I'm not wishing that anybody gets persecuted the way that Paul was persecuted. But I do believe that God has called us to something bigger and something greater. And I think there should be a certain amount of strain and struggle in our life. I love this quote here, and I found this from one of the Spartan races I was at. It says, where there is no struggle, there is no strength. And that's something that I've shared with people many years. If you don't feel a struggle in your life, you're probably not getting any stronger. And so, as we're tying this all into our Christian walk, where is the struggle in your Christian walk? If you're coming here on Sundays and you've joined a small group, that's great. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you're doing that. But to me, I kind of equate that as like, that's kind of like the bubble run. Coming to church, coming to small groups. I think you guys are capable of more than just running the bubble run for Christ. I think there's missions trips that you guys have probably been thinking about doing but have never worked up the courage to do it. I believe that there's businesses, profit and nonprofit businesses that have been birthed in your minds, but you haven't done anything with it. And so I want to encourage you today, stop running the bubble run for Christ. Think about running the marathon. Think about what you can do. I believe God has called each and every one of you to a greater calling. And so what is that race? What is the race that God has called you to? Will you continue to endure even when things get tough? Paul says in 2 Timothy 3:12, everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. And in 2 Timothy 4:7, he says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now, one of the things we've done this summer for our students is we put together a really fun calendar full of beach days, full of laser tag. We got some Nagati splash days coming up. If these students come and attend every single one of these events, that's awesome. I want you guys there. But how hard is that? Is that hard? Is that hard to show up to the beach? No. Where the struggle happens is when you know that you have a friend who you've been praying for, and you decide, I'm going to invite that friend to one of our church events so they can see all the other Christian people that I hang out with, so they can meet some of our leaders. And so that's the challenge. The challenge isn't to come and have a fun summer. Anybody can do that. The challenge is to bring your friends and your family, people that you've been praying for, people who need the love of Jesus in their life. And the same goes for you guys. Be thinking about who in your life needs to experience the love of Jesus, because I believe that's part of your calling. Someone once told me that when you're doing like outreach and missions, if you take on the mindset that you might be the only Jesus that person ever sees, it just puts a little bit more of a weight and focus on, wow, this coworker that I'm spending time with, I might be their only way for them to experience God. And I want you guys to be open to taking that on. I pray that you spend time praying for the people that are in your world. Ask God to reveal to you who he wants you to reach out for him. Now, we have many of you guys have already done this, but if you have not, we have different classes we here at offer at the church. We have the 101, the 201, the 301, the 401. These classes are actually designed for you guys to help discover what you can do for God on a greater level. God has gifted each and every one of you with multiple gifts and talents, one to bless this body, but also to bless and reach the ends of the world. And so if you have not taken those classes, I do encourage you guys to sign up and take those classes. We'd love to have you, and I know it would be a huge blessing to each and every one of you. So as we close, keep in mind, when you get to heaven, I want you guys to feel like you have fought the good fight and like you've finished the race, that you've kept the faith. My mom used to say to me when I was really young, she said, the only thing we get to take to heaven with us is other people. So you can spend all this time accumulating things, homes, RVs, jet skis, family vacations, a lot of these things which are fun and bring us pleasure. But at the end of the day, we don't get to take any of it with us. The only thing we get to take with us are our neighbors. So I pray that you guys accept that challenge and run that race for Christ. I want to close in prayer today. So please, everyone, just close your eyes, bow your heads. Before I pray, I just want you to focus. What is the race that you're running? Is there any strain? Is there any struggle in your race? Or have you hit a point where you feel like you're on a plateau? Visualize what God can do through you. Maybe it's an idea that you have not even thought of for 5 or 10 years, but you know God has called you to something and you've kind of ignored it because you knew it was going to take a little too much work or you were going to face some hardship along the way. Father, I pray right now, Lord, is God, we are just thinking about the race that we can run for you. God, I want to pray for anybody in here who feels like they are burdened and they are beat down right now from the race that they've been running. God, I understand that people in here just need to feel you and need to feel some relief and comfort. And God, so I pray if there's anyone today holding on to some of that baggage that's keeping them from running the race for you, I pray that they can put that behind them and never look back. And God, I pray for everyone in here who's identifying, even right now, the calling that you have for them. I pray that today's message, Lord, that the words, Lord, that you're speaking to them, Lord, it'll cause them to write something down, to write that idea, to keep that to where when they leave today, they're going to go after their true calling. God, we thank you. We love you, God. God, you are awesome, and you have been so good in our lives. We just want to show that same love to those around us, bring others to you. In your name we pray, and everyone said, amen. Amen. Thank you for being here today with us, guys, and hopefully we will see you next week. Hey, thank you. Thanks.
Outstanding. Well, you did phenomenal.
Thank you.
How's the new house?